Hey Summoners, and welcome back to another episode of Pro Counters. As always, we're going to talk about which champions you need to consider picking up in order to counter the meta on patch 9.18. These picks are likely going to be solid counters for the next patch as well, since Worlds is going to be planned for 9.19. We don't expect any crazy balance changes right before Worlds, so now is definitely a good time to learn someone new. But before we get started, make sure you go to ProGuides.com if you want to see huge improvements to your rank. We upload video guides like this one very similar on our website every single day. As of now, we're currently uploading a Challenger gameplay analysis guide for every single champion, so make sure to click that link below. Also, we have an exclusive feature called Play with a Pro, which provides instant, on-demand 24/7 coaching from the best of the best. Trust me guys, you don't want to miss out on this, so sign up today. Now with that being said, let's jump right into it. Let's start with top lane. Although we featured him in 9.16, we're giving Singed another run in our series. We're making an effort to not chase him though. Like we mentioned before, Singed does well into a lot of popular picks. Most notably, he has high win rates versus Kled, Aatrox, Jax, and Pantheon. His ability to kite and chase makes him a nuisance for champions like these, and he can create leads that he wants. In fact, it's usually quite the opposite, and they're going to have a very hard time laning versus him. Just like bruisers, Singed prefers to take longer trades with his poison. The issue is, however, he doesn't want to allow his opponents to auto-attack him, forcing them to chase into his poison if they want to fight for extended periods of time. When Singed starts to pull ahead, he can either pressure kills on his opponents or pressure the rest of the map by proxying waves. Proxying waves allows him to create extended roam timers for himself, where he can usually look for the enemy jungler, teleport bottom, or even roam mid. In the later stages of the game, he becomes a huge threat since he can make picks with Righteous Glory and soak a ton of damage during teamfights. Another counter pick we want to mention in the top lane is Mordekaiser. While the hype around him has died down a little bit, he is a great answer to some of the more low-key OP picks like Malphite and Alawi. He has other favorable matchups like Camille and Kled, but also struggles versus some meta champions. Overall, he is safe enough to blind pick, but not the best one as a result of this. One great thing about him though is that he deals magic damage, making him a great way to round out your team's damage splits if you ever have an AD mid laner. Mordekaiser's high damage output and ultimate makes it very difficult to safely fight him during laning phase. As the game starts to progress, he becomes a team fighting terror, and he's also able to isolate his primary target and take them on in a 1v1 showdown. Remember that you have a lot of versatility with your ultimate as well. You can ult an easy target who has no hope of 1v1ing you, or use it as utility. In a Baron fight, you can ult the enemy jungler to disorient them, or you can ult a fed enemy carry and try to hide from them in the jungle to waste their time. Regardless, Mordekaiser is the epitome of a juggernaut. He hits hard while also providing that frontline presence many teams desire, especially in the late game. Here's a quick recap for all of the builds that we mentioned in the top lane. Okay, let's move on to jungle. While he's seeing a lot of play as support, don't forget that Volibear is, well, a bear, and he's got to return back to the jungle eventually, especially since he's got some great matchups. Voli's E has a knockback on it, allowing him to outplay many opponents who have dashes or channeled abilities. He's also outright tanky, giving his opponents a very hard time bursting him down. And since he's beefy, he's able to take advantage of strong all-ins and win out in longer skirmishes. Volibear suffers from being kiteable, so your best bet is to force fights around objectives and or gank lanes who have really good setup. Like any jungler, you can deny a vision to force your opponents to walk blindly into you and sneak in a sucker punch rather than you having to run head first at them. Especially in lower elo, where mechanics aren't as well developed, we highly recommend Volibear because of his raw damage, tankiness, and simplicity. This patch, we highly suggest him as a counterpick to Lee Sin, Jarvan, Vi, and Rengar. Our next jungle pick is Echo. Jungle Echo is not something new, but it's not where most players expect him to go. A secondary strength of picking Echo jungle is that it baits the enemy team into trying to counterpick him mid lane. Echo has a solid clear, provides magic damage, and holds a lot of presence as a diver. As a result of these strengths, he's a great counter to many champions who rely on bursting a target down quickly. Evelynn, Nocturne, and Elise are all champions that Echo is able to kill quickly because of his own burst, and very little risk because he can always ult out. He's also a good pick into Hecarim and Rek'Sai because he's able to disengage from them fairly well, or try to fight it out if he lands a good stun. In terms of ganking, Echo definitely isn't too bad. While his stun is difficult to land, this just means that his skill ceiling is very high. At the end of the day, he has a gap closer, a 3-hit passive, and deals bonus damage to lower health enemies. Being able to close the gap is crucial, as this is how you'll usually force your opponents to flash. This is where experience comes in, as you'll eventually learn that you can aim your W to either predict your enemy's flash or directly onto them while in the fog of war. His ultimate also allows him to commit with a little bit more safety. Even if he gets counter-ganked, he can always nope right on out of there by pressing R. Here's a quick recap for all of the builds that we mentioned in the jungle. Before we transition out of the jungle, I want to let you guys know that we have a great jungling course by Nightblue3 on ProGuides.com. He covers everything you need to know about it, so go check it out if you want to improve as a jungler. Alright, let's move on to the mid lane. After several buffs, Galio is finally at a point where he can feel a little bit less meme-worthy. For those skeptics out there, last patch he actually held a 51% win rate in the mid lane. Yes, we do miss his flash W, and some players might still feel like he is weak. However, his statistics don't lie, and it's about to be a great presence as a counter pick. He's a great pick into popular champions like Akali, Aurelia, and Sylas, while also countering several OP champions like Katarina, Fizz, LeBlanc, and Echo. Versus melee champions, Galio can constantly poke them out with Q whenever they get in range or want to farm. Whenever they farm the melee minions, they put themselves at risk of heavier trading from Galio's Justice Punch, followed up by his other abilities. There's also always the risk of having to take the brunt of Galio's full combo when he's right next to you. All that he has to do is charge his taunt, catch you, press Q, then finish it with his E and an auto attack. This will usually take a hefty chunk from his opponent's health bars, forcing them to concede farm or risk dying in a second trade. Pantheon is definitely a solid top laner at the moment, but his strong laning presence also makes him a solid pick in the mid lane as well. In the mid lane, he's better able to utilize his ultimate since he can roam to both side lanes much easier. Pantheon's E also makes him a great counter to champions trying to burst him down, like Zed, Kiana, and Echo. His very strong all-in, on the other hand, also allows him to threaten scaling champions like Vladimir as well. It's difficult to farm up versus Pantheon because you'll have to eat a stun to the face, followed up by his Q several times in lane. Once you get too low, he gains access to the execute portion of his Q, making him a very terrifying lane opponent. Cassiopeia is our third mid lane pick. Her ground and terrifying all-in also make her a great counterpick to Vladimir, Katarina, Echo, and Sylas. Cassiopeia's strengths are her pretty clear, scaling well and dealing a lot of damage, and also the ability to chase down foes as long as she lands her Q. Let's talk about how matchups go a bit more. Against Vlad and champions like him, Cassio is able to punish any attempts at taking short and bursty trades with her Q and her E. Landing her Q provides her movement speed to chase, while her E obviously lets her machine gun down her foes. Champions that heavily rely on an ability for mobility, such as Katarina, Echo, and Sylas, are going to heavily suffer while stuck in Cass's miasma. By the time they manage to walk out, they've already taken a huge chunk of damage, and if they still commit, they expose themselves to getting ulted. Here's a quick recap for all of the builds that we mentioned for mid lane. Alright, let's move on to the bot lane. So this patch, Miss Fortune received a buff on her E, making its slow more impactful early on. We've already mentioned in our other videos that Miss Fortune is a great niche counter pick, and this buff should help her find her footing and really exploit her winning matchups. MF's strong, short trades also allow her to chunk her opponents and force them to back away from the minion wave. From there, she can try to bounce her Q off of a minion to land some heavy damage afterwards. At level 6, her all-in potential increases significantly, putting champions who prefer extended fights in less than optimal circumstances. Champions like Kai'Sa, Ezreal, and Lucian have a very difficult time finding favorable trades against MF. Ashe and Varus's immobility also leaves them very prone to death. Anytime they get caught out, they're pretty sure to take an MF ult to the face. In response to two lane bullies, Jhin and Caitlyn receiving buffs this patch, be ready to pull out Ashe. She's not extremely difficult to play and can punish these picks relatively well. Ashe has a range advantage over most marksmen, and also enough to have an easier time than others when trying to trade auto for auto with Caitlyn. The other thing is that her W has a very long range, allowing her to poke out Caitlyn, who typically wants to be the bully herself. At level 6, she's easily able to set up ganks or all-in, and her above-average extended trading also allows her to come out on top in many situations. Caitlyn's lane phase, for example, becomes much more difficult once Ashe can shoot her ultimate at her and force a fight. Other champions like Jhin and Kai'Sa are prone to getting poked out and also losing all-ins as a result of Ashe's ultimate. In the case of champions like Draven, Ashe's ultimate easily sets up ganks or follow-up to burst him down before he can do anything, limiting Draven's potential to snowball. Here's a quick recap for all of the builds that we mentioned for ADC. Finally, let's talk about supports. Once again, Janna is rising as a popular counter to other meta supports. Her movement speed, disengage, and shield make her a very difficult adversary for the likes of Pyke, Thresh, Morgana, Leona, and Rakan. All these champions have crucial abilities to land, and it's very difficult to even get into position to try because of Janna's tornado. She's able to disengage any attempts of aggression in lane, and even if her opponents do manage to finally get in range, her nimbleness proves to be a second challenge her enemies have to face. When her enemies can't aggress, Janna is free to use her W to slowly whittle down her opponents and eventually pressure kills when they're low enough. Later on into the game, her utility and ability to reset fights is one of the best assets one can hope to have. She neutralizes many other supports who try to hard engage and punishes them for it when they're not executed well. Our final pick is Rakan. Like Janna, he's nimble enough and hard to catch. Even if he gets caught out, he can always jump back to his lane partner by using E. On the flip side, he can poke with Q and or W, then jump out with his E for solid trades. Once he hits 6, he's able to convert good trades into kills in lane, especially when laning with Xayah. Rakan is also able to counter hard engaged champions like Thresh, Leona, Pyke, and Blitzcrank in two ways. He can either eat their CC and jump back to his lane partner, or counter engage with his own combo. Even if Leona were to land her abilities on Rakan's laning partner, he can use his W and his R to lock up the enemy bot laner to keep his lane partner safe. Come later into the game, his playmaking and mobility give him a lot more options than other supports. And here's a quick recap for all of the builds that we mentioned for support. That's going to conclude this episode of Pro Counters. Thank you so much for watching. If you want more content like this to improve, check out ProGuides.com, where we've teamed up with pro players to create guides designed to help you take your game to the next level. Also, keep an eye out on our YouTube channel, where we're constantly updating it with new content just like this. Good luck on the Rift, and we'll see you all next time.